In the quiet streets of London, where ancient traditions clash with modern realities, a simple video clip would spark a national debate that reached the very heart of the British monarchy. It wasn't a scandal involving affairs, money, or politics. Instead, it was something far more unexpected, a moment of pure joy captured on camera that would divide a nation and challenge everything people thought they knew about royal duty, public service, and what it truly means to connect with the people you serve. The clip lasted only 17 seconds. A man in casual clothes, laughing as he attempted a scooter trick in a quiet park. Children cheered in the background. The sun was setting, casting golden light across the scene. It should have been nothing more than a father enjoying time with his kids. But, when that man happened to be the future King of England, those 17 seconds would ignite a firestorm that revealed the deep fractures in how Britain sees itself, its values, and its royal family. This is the story of how a moment of spontaneous happiness became a symbol of everything wrong with modern royalty, or everything right with it, depending on who you asked. It's a story about tradition versus progress, duty versus humanity, and the impossible balance of being both a public figure and a private person in the age of social media. Most importantly, it's a story about how quickly joy can turn to controversy when you're born to wear a crown. Prince William had always been different from his father. While King Charles preferred formal gardens and serious conversations about architecture, William found himself drawn to the chaos and energy of his 3 children. On this particular Saturday afternoon in early March, the Prince of Wales had made a decision that would change everything, though he had no way of knowing it at the time. The day had started like any other weekend at Adelaide Cottage. Catherine had taken Charlotte to her riding lesson, leaving William alone with George and Louis. The boys had been restless, cooped up inside due to the morning rain, and, when the clouds finally parted around 3 o'clock, William knew exactly what they needed to do. "Right then, boys," he had said, clapping his hands together. "Park time." George, now 11 and increasingly aware of his royal status, had hesitated. "Dad, shouldn't we take security? And what about the photographers?" William looked at his eldest son, seeing too much worry in eyes that should have been filled with nothing but childhood excitement. This was exactly what he wanted to avoid, his children growing up feeling trapped by their birthright, unable to enjoy simple pleasures without considering the implications. "Sometimes, George, we just need to be a family," William had replied, grabbing the scooters from the garage. "Your grandfather managed it when he was young, and so can we." The local park was only a 10-minute walk from their home, a modest green space with worn playground equipment and paths that had seen better days. It wasn't the manicured perfection of the royal estates, but that was exactly why William loved it. Here, his children could be normal kids, at least for a little while. Louis, 8 years old and fearless, immediately claimed the blue scooter and began racing around the empty basketball court. George followed more cautiously on the red one, still glancing around nervously for cameras or curious onlookers. William watched them for a moment, then picked up the black scooter, the one the boys had been begging him to try for weeks. "Come on, Dad!" Louis shouted. "Do the trick I showed you." The trick in question was a simple tail whip, something Louis had learned from a YouTube video and had been practicing for months. William had watched his youngest son attempt it dozens of times, usually ending up on the ground with scraped knees and an even bigger smile. Today, for reasons he couldn't quite explain, William found himself nodding. "All right," he called back. "But, if I break something, you're explaining it to your mother." The first attempt was disastrous. William, who hadn't been on a scooter since his own childhood, nearly lost his balance before he even got moving. George and Louis burst into laughter, and soon William was laughing too. It felt good, this moment of pure silliness with his boys. No royal engagements, no speeches about duty and service, no cameras documenting every carefully chosen word and gesture. "Try again," George encouraged, his earlier nervousness forgotten. "You almost had it." William did try again. And again. By the 4th attempt, he was getting the hang of it, gaining enough speed to actually attempt the trick. A small group of local children had gathered to watch, drawn by the unusual sight of an adult playing so enthusiastically. They cheered each attempt, offering advice and encouragement. "Higher jump," called out a girl with pigtails. "You need more air time." William found himself taking advice from a 10-year-old, and loving every minute of it. This was what he wanted for his own children: the ability to connect with other kids without barriers, to learn from anyone willing to teach, to find joy in simple accomplishments. On the 7th attempt, everything came together. William gained the perfect amount of speed, hit the small ramp the children had built from a piece of wood and some bricks, and, for one glorious moment, he was airborne. The scooter spun beneath him, completing a full rotation before he landed, wobbling but upright, on the other side. The cheer that went up from the gathered children was deafening. George and Louis rushed over to hug their father, both talking at once about how amazing it had looked. Other kids crowded around, asking if he could do it again, begging him to teach them. In that moment, William felt something he rarely experienced in his official role: a genuine connection with young people based not on his title or position, but simply on a shared moment of achievement and joy. These children weren't impressed because he was the Prince of Wales. They were excited because he had done something cool, and he had done it in their space, playing by their rules. What none of them noticed was Sarah Chen, a university student and part-time social media content creator, who had been walking her dog through the park. She had stopped to watch the unusual scene, charmed by the sight of an adult so enthusiastically participating in what was clearly a children's game. When the man successfully completed the trick, Sarah instinctively pulled out her phone and captured the celebration that followed. The video she recorded was shaky and amateur, clearly filmed from a distance. It showed a group of children cheering around a tall man in jeans and a navy sweater, all of them jumping and celebrating together. The man's face wasn't clearly visible, and Sarah had no idea who he was. She just knew she had captured something beautiful, a moment of pure joy and community in an increasingly divided world. Without much thought, Sarah uploaded the video to her TikTok account with the caption, "When adults remember how to play Red Heart, love seeing this kind of energy in our local park." The video gained modest attention at first. A few hundred likes, some comments about how nice it was to see intergenerational play, a handful of shares. Sarah went home thinking she had simply documented a sweet moment in her neighborhood. Meanwhile, William had returned to Adelaide Cottage with his boys, all of them still buzzing with excitement. They had spent another hour in the park, taking turns on the scooters and teaching some of the local children different tricks. George had overcome his initial hesitation and was now planning to bring his own friends to the park next weekend. Louis was already working on an even more ambitious trick he wanted to show his father. Catherine had returned from Charlotte's riding lesson to find her husband and sons animatedly discussing ramps, speed, and airtime over afternoon tea. The change in George particularly caught her attention. Her eldest son, who had been increasingly withdrawn and serious lately, was laughing and gesturing enthusiastically as he described his father's triumph. "You should have seen him, Mum!" George exclaimed. "Dad actually looked cool for once." William feigned offense, but Catherine could see the pride and happiness radiating from him. These were the moments that made all the challenges of royal life worthwhile, when they could just be a family, when their children could see them as people rather than institutions. As evening fell and the family settled in for a quiet dinner, none of them could have imagined that Sarah's innocent video was beginning to circulate beyond her small circle of followers. A friend had shared it to Instagram. Someone else had posted it on Twitter. Each share added new context, new speculation about the identity of the enthusiastic scooter rider. By midnight, someone had figured it out. The revelation came from an eagle-eyed royal watcher who recognized the distinctive navy sweater William had been wearing, the same one he had worn to a charity event the previous week. Another clue was the black Range Rover visible in the background of the video, parked in a location that corresponded with Adelaide Cottage's proximity to the park. Within hours, Sarah's innocent documentation of community joy had been transformed into something entirely different. The video was re-uploaded with new captions identifying the scooter rider as the future King of England. News outlets began picking up the story. Social media exploded with opinions, analysis, and criticism. By the time William woke up the next morning, the 17 seconds Sarah had captured had been viewed millions of times, dissected by royal experts, and denounced by traditionalists as evidence of everything wrong with the modern monarchy. The transformation was swift and merciless. What had been a moment of pure fatherly joy was now being analyzed through the lens of royal duty, public perception, and political symbolism. The children who had cheered his success were forgotten in favor of debates about whether future kings should engage in such frivolous activities. William discovered the controversy when his private secretary called him before 7 a.m., her voice tight with stress. The tabloids had already prepared their headlines for the morning edition. The Daily Mail was leading the charge with their criticism, but they were far from alone. As William sat in his kitchen, scrolling through the increasingly harsh commentary on his 17 seconds of happiness, he felt a familiar weight settling on his shoulders. It was the weight of understanding that even his most innocent moments belonged not to him, but to the public. Every choice, every gesture, every moment of spontaneity would be measured against an impossible standard of royal propriety. But, this time, something was different. This time, William found himself thinking not about the criticism, but about the joy in his sons' faces when he had landed that trick. He thought about the local children who had welcomed them without hesitation, who had cheered his success with genuine enthusiasm. He thought about George's transformation from worried young prince to excited kid planning future park adventures. The controversy was just beginning, but William had already made his decision about how to respond. The question was whether the institution he represented, and the media that covered it, would allow him to stand by that choice. The Daily Mail's morning edition hit newsstands across Britain with a headline that would define the next phase of William's life: Royal Circus, future king's skateboard stunt shows alarming disconnect from duty. The accompanying editorial, written by veteran royal correspondent Margaret Thornfield, pulled no punches in its assessment of what she saw as a fundamental failure of royal responsibility. Thornfield had been covering the royal family for 37 years, having started her career during the tumultuous days of Charles and Diana's marriage. She had witnessed scandals, divorces, deaths, and celebrations, but something about this particular incident had struck a nerve that even she couldn't fully explain. In her column, Thornfield wrote with the authority of someone who had spent decades defining what royal behavior should look like. The Prince of Wales appears to have forgotten that he is not simply William Wales, private citizen and father of 3. He is the heir to the throne, the future head of the Commonwealth, and the embodiment of British values and dignity. Rolling around a public park on children's toys while taxpayers struggle with the cost of living crisis demonstrates a shocking tone deafness that should concern us all. The critique didn't stop there. Thornfield went on to compare William's behavior unfavorably to that of his grandmother, the late Queen Elizabeth II, who had embodied duty and restraint throughout her 70-year reign. One cannot imagine Her late Majesty attempting skateboard tricks while the nation faced economic hardship, Thornfield continued. The monarchy's strength has always been its ability to remain above the fray, to provide stability and dignity in uncertain times. This latest episode suggests a dangerous shift toward celebrity culture rather than true public service. The column was accompanied by still images captured from Sarah's video, showing William mid-trick, his face lit with laughter and excitement. The images had been carefully selected to emphasize what the editors saw as the inappropriate nature of his behavior. One photo showed him in the air, arms windmilling for balance, with the caption, "Is this the dignity we expect from our future king?" The Daily Mail's coverage might have remained an isolated criticism if not for the perfect storm of factors that allowed the story to explode across all forms of media. It was a slow news week, with Parliament in recess and no major international crises demanding attention. The video itself was endlessly shareable, short enough for social media platforms but dramatic enough to capture attention. Most importantly, it touched on deeper anxieties about the monarchy's relevance in modern Britain. Within hours of the Daily Mail's publication, other outlets began picking up the story. The Sun ran with "Wheelie embarrassing, will Scooter shame," while the Express opted for "royal role model." Prince's playground antics sparked concern. Each publication added its own angle, but the underlying message was consistent: William had crossed a line from acceptable royal behavior into something more troubling. Social media amplified the controversy exponentially. Twitter became a battleground of opinion, with hashtags like #RoyalScootergate and #DignitarianFail trending throughout the morning. Conservative voices condemned William's behavior as evidence of the monarchy's declining standards, while others defended his right to enjoy time with his children. Rebecca Morrison, a political commentator with 500,000 Twitter followers, posted a thread that gained massive traction: "The monarchy works because it represents something eternal and above ordinary concerns." When royals start acting like influencers seeking viral moments, they undermine the very foundation of their authority. This isn't about fun versus duty, it's about understanding your role in history. The criticism wasn't limited to traditional media outlets. Royal historians weighed in with academic analysis of how William's behavior compared to his predecessors. Dr. Helena Fitzpatrick, author of several books on royal protocol, appeared on BBC News to discuss what she called the careful balance between accessibility and dignity that defines successful monarchs. The royal family has always faced the challenge of appearing relatable while maintaining the mystique and authority necessary for their constitutional role, Dr. Fitzpatrick explained to anchor Sophie Rayworth. Previous generations found ways to show their humanity through their charitable work, their service during wartime, their dedication to duty despite personal sacrifice. The concern here is whether viral social media moments can provide the same foundation for public respect and support. The international media quickly picked up the story, with CNN running a segment on the modernizing monarchy's growing pains and French newspapers gleefully reporting on Le Prince Scatter with barely concealed amusement at British royal protocol debates. But the most damaging coverage came from unexpected sources. Religious leaders began speaking out about the importance of dignity and proper example setting. The Bishop of Winchester, in his weekly sermon, spoke about leadership requiring sacrifice of personal desires for the greater good, though he was careful not to mention William directly. Conservative politicians began making veiled references to the importance of institutional respect in their public appearances. The controversy reached a new level when former Royal Protection Officer James Fletcher gave an interview to ITV News about the security implications of William's unscheduled park visit. Fletcher, who had worked for the royal family for 15 years before retiring, expressed concern about the precedent being set. Royal protection isn't just about preventing physical harm, Fletcher explained. It's about maintaining the careful control of royal image and presence that allows the family to function effectively. When senior royals make spontaneous public appearances without security coordination, they put themselves and members of the public at risk while creating situations exactly like this one, where private family moments become public relations disasters. The security angle added a new dimension to the criticism, suggesting that William's decision to visit the park wasn't just undignified but potentially dangerous. Former tabloid editor Simon Kellings appeared on morning television to argue that the incident revealed deeper problems with William's judgment. "This isn't about being a fun dad," Kellings insisted during his appearance on Good Morning Britain. "Every senior royal knows that their actions have consequences beyond their immediate family." The Prince of Wales chose to prioritize a moment of personal enjoyment over his institutional responsibilities, and that choice reveals something concerning about his understanding of his role. The pile-on continued throughout the week, with each day bringing new angles and fresh criticism. Royal biographers analyzed William's upbringing, questioning whether his relatively normal childhood had prepared him adequately for the constraints of senior royal life. Tabloid columnists compared him unfavorably to his father, who despite his own controversies had never been accused of such casual disregard for protocol. Even fashion critics joined the fray, analyzing William's choice to wear casual clothes in public and what it said about his attitude toward royal representation. The navy sweater, once unremarkable, became symbolic of everything critics saw as wrong with his approach to public life. The most painful criticism came from sources within the royal establishment itself. Anonymous quotes appeared in various publications from palace insiders expressing concern about William's judgment. Whether these sources were real or fabricated, their impact was significant, suggesting that even within royal circles, there was disapproval of his actions. One particularly damaging quote, published in the Times, read, "There's a feeling among some staff that the Prince of Wales may be trying too hard to be different from previous generations without fully understanding what he might be sacrificing in the process." The monarchy's power comes from respect, and respect comes from consistent dignity. Viral videos don't build the kind of authority needed to lead a nation. The criticism began to take its toll not just on William, but on his family. Catherine found herself fielding questions about her husband's behavior during what should have been routine royal engagements. At a charity event for children's literacy, she was asked directly by a reporter whether she supported her husband's playground antics. Catherine's response was measured but firm. "I support my husband in being the best father he can be to our children. I think any parent can understand the importance of showing your children that you're present and engaged in their interests." But even her defense was criticized by some commentators as inadequate, suggesting that she should have been more forceful in acknowledging the inappropriateness of William's behavior. The children felt the impact too. George, who had been so excited about his father's trick, began asking questions about why people were saying mean things about their family. Louis, too young to fully understand the controversy, could still sense the tension in the household and the increased scrutiny whenever they left the house. William himself tried to maintain his normal schedule of royal engagements, but the scooter controversy followed him everywhere. At a veterans' charity event, he was asked whether he thought his behavior set a good example for young people. During a hospital visit, a reporter shouted questions about whether he planned to apologize for his actions. The constant criticism began to wear on him, but not in the way his critics might have expected. Rather than feeling ashamed of his moment of spontaneous fatherhood, William found himself increasingly convinced that the reaction revealed something deeply problematic about how the monarchy was perceived and covered. In private conversations with his staff, William began expressing frustration with what he saw as an impossible standard being applied to his family's every movement. "They want us to be relatable but not too relatable," he told his private secretary during one particularly difficult week. "They want us to connect with people but only in ways that were appropriate 50 years ago. How are we supposed to remain relevant if we can't actually live in the modern world?" The controversy also revealed the generation gap within royal coverage, with younger journalists and social media users largely defending William's actions while older, more established voices condemned them. Online, Generation Z and millennial parents created their own hashtags like #dadgoals and #royalrelatability, sharing videos of their own attempts at skateboard tricks and scooter stunts. A counter-narrative began to emerge on platforms like TikTok and Instagram, where parents celebrated William's willingness to engage with his children's interests. Mom bloggers wrote posts about the importance of fathers showing up for their kids, regardless of their professional responsibilities. Child development experts appeared in podcasts and online videos discussing the positive impact of playful parenting. But these supportive voices were largely drowned out by the sustained criticism from traditional media outlets and established royal commentators. The narrative that had taken hold was that William had made a serious error in judgment, and that narrative was being reinforced daily through multiple channels. The pressure reached a crescendo when Conservative MP Sir Richard Pemberton raised the issue during Prime Minister's questions, asking whether the government had confidence in the future King's understanding of his constitutional role. Though the Prime Minister deflected the question, the fact that it had been raised in Parliament elevated the controversy to a new level of seriousness. As the second week of coverage began, William faced a decision about how to respond. His advisors were split between those who recommended a formal statement acknowledging the inappropriateness of his actions and those who urged him to simply wait for the story to fade from public attention. But William was beginning to realize that this controversy was about something much larger than 17 seconds of scooter tricks. It was about the fundamental question of what kind of monarchy Britain wanted, and whether there was space within that institution for the kind of father and leader he was determined to be. The shift began quietly, almost imperceptibly, with a single social media post from an unexpected source. Dr. Amanda Reeves, a child psychologist at Great Ormond Street Hospital, had been watching the coverage of William's scooter incident with growing frustration. As someone who worked daily with children facing serious medical challenges, she had witnessed firsthand the profound impact that engaged, playful parents could have on their children's well-being and development. On the Tuesday morning of the second week of coverage, Dr. Reeves posted a thread on Twitter that would change the entire trajectory of the conversation. "I've spent 15 years working with children and families in crisis," she wrote. "Let me tell you what I saw in that video: a father showing his children that their interests matter to him, that he values their happiness enough to step outside his comfort zone. This is exemplary parenting, not embarrassing behavior." Her thread continued for 12 posts, each one backed by research and real-world experience. She discussed the importance of fathers engaging in child-led play, the psychological benefits of adults modeling risk-taking and resilience, and the crucial role of family bonding activities in child development. Most powerfully, she shared anonymized stories of children whose recovery had been accelerated by parents who engaged fully with their interests and activities. "I have worked with royal families facing medical crises," Dr. Reeves wrote in her final post. "I can tell you that the Prince of Wales's willingness to be fully present with his children, to celebrate their world on their terms, is exactly the kind of parenting that builds resilient, confident young people. We should be celebrating this, not criticizing it." Dr. Reeves had only 3,000 followers, but her thread was shared by parents, educators, and child development professionals across the country. Within hours, it had been retweeted thousands of times, and major parenting organizations began echoing her sentiments. The National Association of Primary Head Teachers issued a statement supporting Dr. Reeves's position. "We work with children every day," their spokesperson said. "We know the difference between children whose parents are truly engaged with them and those who aren't." Prince William demonstrated exactly the kind of active, involved parenting we encourage in all families. Similar support came from unexpected quarters. Children's charities began speaking out about the importance of play in family relationships. Youth organizations praised William for demonstrating that adults could participate in children's activities without losing dignity. Sports psychology experts appeared on radio programs to discuss the mental health benefits of physical play for both children and adults. But the most significant moment came when Sarah Chen, the university student who had originally recorded the video, decided to speak publicly about what she had witnessed that day. She had been largely silent during the initial wave of criticism, overwhelmed by the attention her innocent video had generated. But, as the debate intensified, Sarah felt compelled to share the full context of what she had seen. In an interview with BBC Radio 4's Today program, Sarah provided details that had been missing from the media coverage. "What I saw wasn't just someone doing a scooter trick," she explained. "I watched a man patiently teaching children, encouraging them, celebrating their successes. He spent over an hour in that park, and every minute of it was focused on making sure those kids were having fun and feeling supported." Sarah described how William had helped a shy 7-year-old girl overcome her fear of the scooter, spending 20 minutes patiently encouraging her until she successfully rode across the basketball court for the first time. She talked about watching him carefully ensure that every child in the group got equal attention and support, regardless of their skill level. "He wasn't showing off or seeking attention," Sarah continued. "He was being a dad, but he was also being kind to every child there. When I posted that video, I was trying to capture something beautiful about community and intergenerational play. I never imagined it would turn into a criticism of someone who was just being genuinely caring." The interview was powerful because Sarah had no agenda beyond sharing the truth of what she had experienced. Her description of William's interactions with the local children painted a picture that was dramatically different from the narrative that had dominated the media coverage. Her account was corroborated by other witnesses who began coming forward. Mrs. Patricia Williams, who lived overlooking the park, had watched the entire interaction from her kitchen window. She contacted local news outlets to share her perspective. "I see that park every day," Mrs. Williams told the Windsor Observer. "Usually, it's just the regular local kids, and they're lovely, but they keep to themselves. That day was different. I watched this man, I didn't know who he was at first, bring all these children together. He was patient, encouraging, and inclusive. By the end, kids who had never spoken to each other were working together to build better ramps and teach each other tricks. It was beautiful to watch." The mother of one of the children who had been at the park, Emma Thompson, also spoke out. Her 9-year-old son Jake had been struggling with confidence issues following his parents' divorce, and the interaction with William had been a turning point for him. "Jake came home that day absolutely glowing," Emma explained in an interview with the local radio station. "He kept talking about how this nice man had listened to his ideas about scooter tricks and had actually tried them. 4 weeks afterward, Jake was more confident, more willing to try new things. Whatever people are saying about that man, I know he made my son feel valued and heard. That's not nothing." As these alternative voices gained attention, the tide of public opinion began to shift. Social media conversations that had been dominated by criticism started featuring more supportive perspectives. Parents began sharing their own stories of times when they had stepped outside their comfort zones to engage with their children's interests. The hashtag parenting goals began trending alongside the more critical hashtags, with thousands of parents posting videos and photos of themselves attempting their children's favorite activities. Fathers, in particular, began sharing stories about the importance of showing their children that their interests and happiness mattered to their parents. Professional athletes joined the conversation as well. Marcus Rashford, the England footballer, posted on Instagram about the importance of adults engaging with young people on their terms. Football, scooters, whatever it is, when you show kids that you value what they care about, you're building their confidence and your relationship with them. Respect to anyone willing to look silly for their kids. Olympic skateboarding medalist Sky Brown, despite being only 15, became an unexpected voice in the debate. In a video posted to her social media accounts, she demonstrated the actual skill required to perform the trick William had attempted. "This isn't easy," she explained, showing the careful balance and timing needed. For someone who isn't used to this kind of thing to stick with it until he got it right, especially with kids watching and learning from him, that takes courage and commitment. The sports angle provided a new framework for understanding the incident. Rather than seeing William's scooter trick as undignified behavior, supporters began framing it as an example of athletic challenge and personal growth. The fact that he had failed several times before succeeding became evidence of perseverance and resilience rather than embarrassing incompetence. Educational experts began weighing in as well. Professor James Mitchell from the Institute of Education at University College London published an opinion piece in The Guardian titled "What the Royal Scooter Incident Teaches Us About Modern Parenting." In it, he argued that William's behavior demonstrated several key principles of effective child rearing. The prince was modeling several crucial lessons, Professor Mitchell wrote. He showed that adults can learn from children, that it's acceptable to fail while working toward a goal, that physical challenges can be fun rather than intimidating, and that parents should take their children's interests seriously. These are exactly the attitudes we want to encourage in modern families. The academic support provided intellectual weight to what had been primarily emotional arguments in William's favor. Universities began incorporating the incident into education and psychology courses as a case study in positive parenting techniques. Meanwhile, international coverage began to shift as well. Parenting experts from around the world weighed in on the controversy, with many expressing surprise at the criticism William had received. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a child development specialist from Spain, appeared on international news programs to discuss the cultural differences in how playful parenting was perceived. "In many countries, we would celebrate a father who engages so fully with his children's interests," Dr. Rodriguez explained. The idea that this behavior is somehow inappropriate for a leader suggests a very rigid understanding of authority and dignity that doesn't necessarily serve children or families well. The international perspective highlighted how uniquely British the criticism had been, raising questions about whether the standards being applied to William were reasonable or necessary. Religious leaders began to offer more nuanced perspectives as well. The Archbishop of York, who had initially remained silent on the controversy, gave a sermon about the importance of joy and play in family life. While he didn't mention William directly, his message about finding the sacred in ordinary moments of connection and laughter was widely interpreted as supportive. "Christ himself told us that we must become like children to enter the kingdom of heaven," the Archbishop said. Perhaps we should consider what it means that our society criticizes adults for embracing childlike joy and wonder. The entertainment industry also rallied to William's support in unexpected ways. Popular television presenter and father of three, Graham Norton, used his chat show platform to defend playful parenting. "Anyone who thinks doing scooter tricks with your kids is undignified clearly doesn't have children," he said during his show's opening monologue. "The most dignified thing any parent can do is show their children that they matter enough to look a bit foolish sometimes." Comedy shows began incorporating the scooter incident into their routines, but increasingly in ways that mocked the critics rather than William himself. The absurdity of grown adults seriously debating whether 17 seconds of harmless fun disqualified someone from future leadership became fertile ground for satirists. The tide was turning, but the transformation in public opinion wasn't uniform or immediate. Traditional royal correspondents largely stuck to their original positions, continuing to argue that William had crossed important lines. Conservative commentators maintained that dignity and restraint were essential qualities for future monarchs. But a new narrative was emerging, one that framed William not as someone who had forgotten his duties, but as someone who understood that modern leadership required genuine connection with people's lived experiences. The scooter incident began to be seen not as evidence of poor judgment, but as proof that William could relate to the challenges and joys of ordinary parents. This shift in perception would prove crucial as the controversy entered its third week, when William himself would finally decide to respond publicly to the debate that had consumed British media and divided public opinion. The emergency meeting was called for 7 o'clock on a Thursday morning, 2.5 weeks after Sarah's video had first gone viral. In the oak-paneled conference room at Kensington Palace, William sat across from his most trusted advisors, all of whom looked as exhausted as he felt from weeks of crisis management and competing pressures. Sir Robert Ashworth, William's private secretary, had served 3 generations of royals and had never encountered a situation quite like this one. The traditional playbook for royal controversies involved either complete silence until the story faded, or a carefully worded statement expressing regret for any misunderstanding. But this situation defied conventional approaches because the controversy centered around behavior that much of the public had come to view as positive. The polling numbers are fascinating, reported communications director Lucy Hamilton, consulting her tablet with a mixture of professional curiosity and personal bewilderment. Initial polling showed 63% disapproval of your actions. But that's shifted dramatically. Current polling shows 57% approval, with particularly strong support among parents aged 25 to 45. William listened to the data, but his mind kept returning to a conversation he'd had with George the evening before. His 11-year-old son had asked why people were angry about them having fun together, and whether it meant they couldn't go back to the park. The question had crystallized something for William that all the polling data and media analysis couldn't capture. The traditionalist media remain largely critical, Lucy continued. But social media sentiment has shifted significantly in your favor. More importantly, the international coverage has become predominantly positive, with several major publications using the incident to highlight progressive British parenting attitudes. Press Secretary James Morrison, who had been fielding media requests around the clock, looked up from his notes. "We've had interview requests from 73 different outlets in the past week alone. Everyone wants your response to the controversy. The longer we wait, the more significant any statement will seem." Sir Robert cleared his throat, a sound that everyone in the room recognized as a prelude to institutional wisdom. The historical precedent suggests that acknowledging the criticism while reaffirming commitment to duty would be the safest approach. The Queen Mother faced similar criticism in 1952 for attending a jazz club, and her response emphasized her understanding of appropriate royal behavior going forward. William had heard this advice repeatedly over the past weeks, and each time it sat more uncomfortably with him. The comparison to his great-grandmother's situation felt particularly problematic because it implicitly accepted that his actions had been inappropriate, which he fundamentally didn't believe. What if we're wrong about what needs apologizing for? William asked, a question that created an uncomfortable silence in the room. What if the problem isn't that I did a scooter trick with my kids, but that we live in a system where 17 seconds of fatherhood becomes a national crisis? The advisors exchanged glances. This was not the direction they had expected the conversation to take, and it represented a fundamental challenge to how royal communications had been managed for decades. Catherine, who had been quietly listening from her seat at the far end of the table, finally spoke. "I think we need to consider what message we're sending to parents across the country if we treat engaged fatherhood as something to apologize for," she said. "George has been asking why Daddy needs to say sorry for playing with him. How do I answer that?" Her intervention shifted the dynamics in the room. While the communications professionals were focused on media management and institutional protection, Catherine's perspective grounded the discussion in the human reality of what the family was experiencing. Lucy Hamilton pulled up additional data on her tablet. "The family angle has been significant in the shifting public opinion," she noted. Focus groups consistently respond positively when the discussion centers on fatherhood and family relationships rather than royal protocol. The criticism is increasingly seen as attacking parenting rather than royal behavior. William stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden where he could see his children's bikes and scooters stored in the shed. The contrast between the policy discussion happening in this formal room and the simple family reality outside seemed to encapsulate the entire controversy. "I've been thinking about why this has become such a big story," William said, still facing the window. "It's not really about me doing a scooter trick. It's about what kind of monarchy we want to be, what kind of leadership we think Britain needs, and whether there's space for humanity within institutional authority." He turned back to face the room. "Every piece of advice I'm getting is about managing this crisis, but maybe we're looking at this wrong. Maybe this isn't a crisis to be managed. Maybe it's an opportunity to have a conversation about modern royal service that we've been avoiding for years." Sir Robert shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Your Royal Highness, while I appreciate the philosophical considerations, we must also consider the practical implications. There are constitutional questions about the monarchy's role that extend far beyond personal family choices." "Are there, though?" William challenged. "When my grandmother spent 70 years on the throne, did her constitutional effectiveness depend on never being seen enjoying herself? When my father became king, did anyone suggest that his environmental activism made him less capable of constitutional service?" The room fell silent as the advisors grappled with questions that challenged fundamental assumptions about royal behavior and public perception. James Morrison broke the silence. "If you decide to make a statement, Your Royal Highness, we need to be very clear about the message and the long-term implications. This will be analyzed and referenced for decades. Every word will matter." William nodded, understanding the weight of that responsibility while also feeling increasingly clear about what he needed to say. Over the next few days, William worked on crafting a response that would address the controversy while staying true to his convictions about fatherhood and modern leadership. He consulted with child development experts, other parents, and even some of the children who had been at the park that day, trying to understand the full impact of what had occurred. The statement, when it finally came, was unlike anything the royal family had issued before. Rather than a formal written release through official channels, William chose to record a video message in the same park where the original incident had occurred, with his children's permission and participation. The video opened with William standing alone next to the basketball court, wearing the same navy sweater that had featured in the original controversy. "3 weeks ago, I spent a wonderful afternoon in this park with my children," he began. "What followed has been a fascinating insight into how we think about parenting, leadership, and the role of public figures in modern society." He went on to acknowledge the criticism he had received while firmly defending his actions. "I've been told that my behavior was undignified, that it set a poor example, that it showed a lack of understanding of my future role. I respectfully disagree. I believe that showing my children that their interests matter to me, that learning new things is valuable at any age, and that joy and connection are worthy pursuits, these are exactly the values I hope to bring to my future service." The most powerful moment in the video came when George and Louis joined their father on camera, not to make statements about the controversy, but simply to demonstrate the scooter trick that had caused such debate. The casual competence with which they performed moves that had taken their father multiple attempts highlighted both his beginner status and his willingness to be vulnerable in pursuit of connection with his children. "I want to be clear," William continued as his sons practiced nearby. "This isn't about choosing between duty and family, between dignity and relatability, between tradition and progress. It's about understanding that effective leadership in the 21st century requires genuine connection with people's lived experiences. I cannot serve families if I don't understand what modern parenting looks like. I cannot represent young people if I'm not willing to enter their world on their terms." The video concluded with William addressing the broader questions that the controversy had raised. "The monarchy's role is to serve the people of this country and the Commonwealth. That service must be grounded in understanding, empathy, and genuine connection. If 17 seconds of playing with my children undermines my ability to serve, then we need to have a serious conversation about what we expect from our institutions and our leaders." The response was immediate and intense. Traditional royal correspondents criticized the video as defensive and inappropriate, arguing that William had doubled down on behavior that should have been apologized for. Conservative commentators saw it as evidence of a dangerous departure from established royal protocol. But the public response was overwhelmingly positive. Parents across the country shared the video enthusiastically, praising William for defending engaged fatherhood. Child development experts applauded his message about the importance of adult-child connection. International media coverage was largely favorable, with many outlets noting the refreshing honesty and humanity in William's approach. More significantly, the video sparked a broader conversation about modern leadership, parenting expectations, and the role of authenticity in public service. University professors assigned it in leadership courses, parenting blogs analyzed its message about family priorities, and political commentators debated its implications for how public figures should balance personal and professional responsibilities. The palace's internal response was more complicated. Some staff members worried that William had set a precedent of directly challenging media criticism rather than managing it through traditional channels. Others saw it as a necessary evolution of royal communications for a new generation. King Charles, who had remained publicly silent throughout the controversy, privately expressed both concern and pride in his son's response. The concern centered on the precedent of detailed public explanations for personal choices. The pride came from William's articulate defense of values that Charles himself held dear, particularly around environmental stewardship and authentic connection with communities. The broader constitutional implications were harder to assess. Some constitutional experts argued that William's response demonstrated exactly the kind of thoughtful engagement with public debate that modern monarchs would need. Others worried that it represented a dangerous politicization of royal positions on social issues. What became clear in the weeks following William's video response was that the scooter controversy had fundamentally shifted how the royal family's relationship with media and public opinion would function going forward. The traditional model of crisis management through silence or careful non-statements had been replaced by something more direct and personal. Whether this represented positive evolution or dangerous departure from constitutional tradition would be debated for years to come, but the immediate impact was undeniable. William had successfully reframed a criticism of his parenting as a defense of modern family values and authentic leadership. 6 months after the scooter video first appeared online, Dr. Helen Cartwright stood before a packed auditorium at Cambridge University, delivering what would become one of the most influential lectures on modern monarchy in recent academic history. Her research into public perception of the royal family had been dramatically altered by what she had initially dismissed as a minor social media controversy. The Windsor scooter incident, as historians may eventually call it, represents a fundamental shift in how constitutional monarchies must navigate the tension between tradition and relevance, Dr. Cartwright told her audience of students, faculty, and visiting scholars. What appeared to be a simple story about inappropriate royal behavior actually revealed deep fractures in British society's expectations of leadership, parenthood, and authentic public service. Her research had tracked the long-term impact of William's response to the controversy, and the results were striking. Polling data showed sustained increases in public support for the monarchy among younger demographics, particularly parents and families. More significantly, the incident had sparked a broader conversation about work-life balance, authentic leadership, and the role of vulnerability in positions of authority. The changes were visible in concrete ways throughout British society. Corporate leadership programs began incorporating case studies of William's response, analyzing how his willingness to defend his personal values had ultimately strengthened rather than weakened his public position. Business schools taught the controversy as an example of how authentic communication could transform criticism into connection. Parenting organizations reported increased attendance at father engagement programs, with many participants explicitly citing William's example as inspiration for more active involvement in their children's activities. The National Fatherhood Institute noted a 12% increase in fathers participating in school activities and children's sports in the months following the controversy. Perhaps most significantly, the incident had permanent effects on royal protocol and communication strategy. The palace had quietly updated its guidelines for royal public appearances, creating more flexibility for spontaneous family activities and reducing the advance notice required for informal public interactions. The change represented a fundamental shift from the rigid scheduling and controlled environments that had defined royal appearances for decades. William himself had become a different kind of public figure in the aftermath of the controversy. His subsequent royal engagements showed a new confidence in combining formality with genuine personal connection. During a visit to a youth center in Birmingham, he spent 20 minutes learning skateboard tricks from teenage participants, an interaction that was covered positively by the same media outlets that had criticized his earlier scooter attempt. "The prince has found his voice," observed royal biographer Jennifer Patterson in her updated analysis of the modern monarchy. The scooter controversy forced him to articulate a vision of royal service that is both traditional in its commitment to duty and revolutionary in its embrace of authentic human connection. The international impact had been equally significant. Commonwealth countries with their own constitutional monarchies began examining their own protocols for royal family interactions with the public. The Canadian royal family's approach to public engagement became notably more relaxed, with Princess Anne's children appearing in informal social media posts about outdoor activities and community involvement. European monarchies, particularly those in Scandinavia, pointed to William's example as evidence of the monarchy's ability to evolve while maintaining constitutional effectiveness. The Swedish royal family explicitly adopted policies encouraging more informal public interactions, crediting the British example with demonstrating that approachability and dignity were not mutually exclusive. The media landscape had transformed as well. Traditional royal correspondents found themselves competing with parenting bloggers and family lifestyle influencers for authority in analyzing royal family behavior. The expertise required to cover the monarchy expanded beyond protocol knowledge to include understanding of child development, modern parenting practices, and family dynamics. Margaret Thornfield, the Daily Mail correspondent whose initial criticism had helped spark the controversy, published a reflective piece 6 months later acknowledging the complexity of the issues involved. "I stand by my belief that royal behavior must be held to high standards," she wrote. "But the public response to this incident has forced me to consider whether those standards should evolve to reflect contemporary understanding of effective leadership and healthy family relationships." Her willingness to engage with the criticisms of her initial coverage represented a broader shift in how royal journalism approached the balance between tradition and progress. Editorial guidelines at major publications were updated to include consideration of family impact and parenting research when analyzing royal behavior involving children. The educational sector had embraced the controversy as a case study in multiple disciplines. Political science courses examined it as an example of how public opinion could shift through organic social media movements rather than traditional media influence. Psychology programs used it to discuss the impact of public criticism on family relationships. Communication studies analyzed the effectiveness of direct response versus traditional crisis management techniques. Perhaps most importantly, the incident had sparked ongoing research into the relationship between authentic leadership and institutional authority. Dr. Amanda Reeves, whose initial defense of William had helped shift public opinion, was now leading a multi-year study on how leaders in various fields could maintain institutional credibility while demonstrating personal vulnerability and relatability. "What we learned from the royal scooter incident is that authenticity and authority are not opposing forces," Dr. Reeves explained in a follow-up interview. "In fact, our research suggests that leaders who demonstrate genuine commitment to their personal values, even when those values are challenged, tend to inspire greater long-term confidence than those who simply conform to external expectations." The children at the center of the original incident had experienced their own transformations. Sarah Chen, whose video had started everything, was now studying media communications at university, with a particular interest in how social media could amplify positive community interactions. She had been invited to speak at conferences about the responsibility of content creators and the unexpected impact of seemingly innocent posts. The local children who had played with William that day had become minor celebrities in their own right, featured in follow-up news stories about the incident's impact on their community. More meaningfully, the park had become a symbol of intergenerational connection and community building, with new programs specifically designed to encourage adults and children to share activities and interests. Emma Thompson, whose son Jake had been at the park that day, had become an advocate for father involvement in children's activities. "Jake is 13 now, and he still talks about that afternoon as one of his favorite memories," she reflected. "Not because he met a prince, but because he experienced an adult taking his interests seriously and celebrating his successes." That's something every child deserves. The broader social impact was visible in changing attitudes toward parental involvement and work-life balance. Corporate policies increasingly recognized the importance of parental engagement, with more companies offering flexible schedules for school events and children's activities. The phrase royal parenting moment had entered casual conversation as shorthand for prioritizing family connection over professional image management. Political implications continued to evolve as well. The incident had demonstrated the monarchy's ability to adapt and respond to contemporary values without abandoning its constitutional role. This flexibility became particularly relevant as Britain navigated ongoing challenges around national identity, generational change, and social cohesion. Opposition politicians who had initially seen the controversy as evidence of royal inappropriateness gradually shifted their focus to other issues as public opinion solidified in William's favor. The incident became an example of how contemporary leaders could maintain institutional credibility while demonstrating personal authenticity. International relations also reflected the incident's impact. William's approach to the controversy was cited by diplomatic observers as evidence of Britain's soft power effectiveness, demonstrating values of family commitment, authentic communication, and graceful response to criticism that resonated with global audiences. The long-term constitutional implications remain subject to scholarly debate, but early assessments suggested that the incident had strengthened rather than weakened the monarchy's position. By successfully defending personal values while maintaining institutional respect, William had demonstrated a model for how future monarchs might navigate similar challenges. As the first anniversary of the Scooter video approached, media outlets prepared retrospective coverage analyzing the incident's lasting impact. The consensus among royal watchers was that what had initially seemed like a minor social media controversy had actually represented a turning point in how the monarchy would function in the digital age. The park where everything began had been quietly upgraded with new equipment and better maintenance, funded through increased community interest and local government investment. A small plaque had been installed noting its role in promoting intergenerational play and community connection, though it made no specific reference to the royal incident that had brought it attention. William continued his royal duties with a new confidence in combining formal protocol with genuine personal engagement. His children, now more aware of their public role, had developed their own understanding of how to balance privacy with authentic public interaction. The family returned to the park regularly, though with more discreet security arrangements and occasional interactions with local media who had learned to balance coverage with respect for family time. The most significant long-term change was perhaps the least visible, a fundamental shift in how British society understood the relationship between public service and personal authenticity. The Scooter controversy had demonstrated that vulnerability and strength were not opposing qualities, that leaders could be both dignified and relatable, and that institutional authority could be enhanced rather than undermined by genuine human connection. As Dr. Cartwright concluded in her Cambridge lecture, the Windsor Scooter incident will likely be remembered not as a crisis successfully managed, but as an opportunity successfully seized to redefine leadership for a new generation. In 17 seconds of amateur scooter tricks, we witnessed the future of constitutional monarchy more human, more connected, and ultimately more relevant than its critics feared or its supporters dared hope. The incident had become part of British cultural history, referenced in comedy shows, discussed in family conversations, and studied in academic programs. But perhaps its most important legacy was simpler. Across the country, fathers were spending more time in parks with their children, adults were taking children's interests more seriously, and families were prioritizing connection over image management. In the end, 17 seconds of playful fatherhood had sparked a national conversation that strengthened both the monarchy and the society it served, proving that sometimes the most powerful leadership moments come not from careful calculation, but from simple human authenticity.